President Obama did return to Washington overnight after his tour of Southeast Asia. CBS News political director John Dickerson is here. John, I want to pick up on what Clarissa just mentioned. The president talking with the Egyptian president 3 times. He has sent his Secretary of State Hillary Clinton to the region for shuttle diplomacy. Does this suggest a very activist role by this administration in this conflict?
I think activist in trying to get this conflict contained in some way, trying to not to have it bleed over and clash in with other states. But I don't think it suggests a long-term or engagement by the president at that level over time. I think they want this done. I mean, Hillary Clinton is not long in the job, and so I think they want to contain this now. But then the question is, what level of engagement from the president in this incredibly sticky area? It's when you think about it, he was just coming from Asia, the so-called pivot to Asia, once again being interrupted by the Middle East.
That's a good point. Charlie?
John, let's take a look at this, what Bernanke said in response to the fiscal crisis.
The worst case scenario where the economy goes off the broad fiscal cliff, the largest fiscal cliff, which according to CBO and to our own analysis would throw the economy into recession, I don't think the Fed has the tools to offset that. That's why it is important.
So where do you think we are in these discussions that are going on with Congress and with other members of the community of interested parties, including business and labor?
Well, the pressure, and that was just one more sign of pressure, as if we needed it. Everybody's been talking about what a disaster this will be. But where we are basically is 2 sets of deals. One, a short-term deal to deal with this austerity crisis, which is, as Ezra Klein of the Washington Post calls it, that will hit us. And there's a short-term deal that needs to be dealt with by the end of the year, and then some kind of agreement for long-term tax reform and for entitlement reform. The question is, can a short-term deal be made in which everybody's locked in then to that more serious process? And what I thought was interesting about Bernanke is he said, you know, that everybody in Washington has to behave like adults in order to give confidence to the business community and to allow the economy to grow. And what's interesting is what kind of a deal can they come up with in the short term that will show that they are actually serious about dealing with these issues. There's no more of these agreements that can be made because they just don't hold. So that's the really interesting question, is what the reaction will be to the short-term deal that gives them the space to then take on the long, difficult questions of tax reform and entitlements.
And what's the likelihood they can make that short-term deal?
I think there's well, it's interesting how you read the leverage, because there's an argument that basically if the so-called fiscal cliff happens, taxes go up for everybody, then you have a conversation about not about raising taxes, but about then cutting taxes. They will have already gone up. And the question is whether the president has a great deal more leverage. He then basically is able to say it's because the Republicans were too stuck that these taxes went up in the first place, and now they don't want to lower taxes on the middle class because they're stuck on trying to keep taxes low for the wealthy. So there is an argument for actually, because the cliff isn't an actual cliff, because nothing will happen the day after that is catastrophic, there's an argument for actually maybe letting this happen. The president gets even more leverage.
Yeah, there's some talk about trying to do 2 things in 2 phases, at least protect the middle class and let the rest of the stuff go over the cliff for maximum pressure. John Dickerson, thank you.
Thanks, Norah.